I've started it again. So hopefully this will now be live. So if you are on YouTube and you've been waiting for us, we have been here chatting, and I apologize profusely, but technicals didn't work, but it does look now as if we are live because it actually says live. Oh, and there's an I, which means someone must be watching. And it looks like it's gone live on YouTube, people. So it just proves, yes, work, but it does look now as if we are live. You can hear me there on YouTube. We are there now. We are live. So that just goes to prove that all of the work that I did today was for absolutely nothing, everyone. You know, but you know, so if you schedule on StreamYard, it's for nothing. So we're going to go back to the beginning. And I'm going to say to everyone that's joined us now, welcome to Tiny Voice Talks Book Salon. And it's our third one. And today I'm really grateful. I'm joined by Haida Fayaz. I'm joined by Vashti Hardy, Simon Smith and James Nichol. Each, in case this is your first time, we get two educators and two authors together every book salon just to chat books, and we choose a theme and we basically just go off that. So just so that everyone knows who you are, if you just give a brief introduction to yourself, then everyone will be filled in. So Haida, tell us who you are. It feels like a competition, doesn't it? Come on down, Haida. Who are you?
I'm going to win. Hi, I'm Haida. I'm a Year 5 teacher at St Matthew's Primary Research School in Nechells in Birmingham. I'm an evidence lead in education, and I currently work at St Matthew's, which has Reading for Pleasure at the heart of its curriculum. And I currently am working with the best Year 5 class who are just firing up my passion for reading.
Oh, that's amazing, Haida. And Simon, you're our other educator on here today. So tell us, who is Simon Smith? Loving that. I really should be a go-to host.
I'm a head teacher of a primary school in Whitby. I'm kind of quite long in the tooth, I think, and longish in the beard. And I've been I'm very passionate mainly about picture books. I think I'm passionate about books full stop, but I kind of have a nerdish obsession with picture books and the power of picture books in getting children to think and getting children to talk. And there are some amazing, stunning picture books out there. And I just think we need to get them into children's hands so that children can start to think around and have that power of books to get them to think beyond themselves, I think. So that's me.
Absolutely. And Simon, it's been commented on that your shelves are looking good. Can I just say to everyone watching that this is the most anyone's committed fully to Tiny Voice Talks Book Salon. Simon has built himself shelves in order to appear, which I think is, you know, that's really upped the bar somewhat. So thank you, Simon. They're looking amazing. Look at that.
Quite proud. Now the phone won't stand up again.
Don't blame you. They're phenomenal. Yeah, indeed. Right. So now, James, you are an author, my love, with a bookshelf that you didn't build. So tell us, who is James?
Hello, everybody. I'm James Nichol. I'm the author of the Apprentice Witch series, which is 3 books about a young girl called Arianwen, who is a witch. And I guess my love of books, I've had kind of a bit of a patchy relationship with books, I suppose. I loved books as a very young child. I remember things like there was an old woman who swallowed a fly, and the giant jam sandwich were real favourites when I was little. And then at school, kind of went downhill a little bit. I was considered to be a slow reader and was in a slow readers group for quite a long time. But I always loved books. I knew that in the school library, there are all these amazing books that I wanted to read, but you weren't allowed to go into the school library if you were a slow reader, which is just evil. And thankfully, I overcame that and just absolutely gobbled up every book I could get my hands on to. And then eventually ended up working as a bookseller and a librarian and now an author as well. So my life is just absolutely full of books. And I kind of stole the bookcase behind me. I didn't really steal it. It was unwanted in a library, so I just took it out of the skip and brought it home and loved it.
So actually, you haven't really sort of taken it. You've just merely shown it love where before it was a very unloved thing.
I've upcycled it.
You've done a good thing. You really have. And Vashti, you are back with us. So tell us about, how are you, Vashti?
I'm doing good, thank you. I'm doing good. I still haven't managed to sort my time management out. I seem to, I don't know, I feel like I'm juggling all these balls and more keep getting thrown in. Help!
Yeah, I think most of us are feeling that way. Now, Vashti, you were the person that came up with the theme for this week. So talk us through it, because, well, this month, I should say, it was very much what is family. So how do we have many conversations, but how did we arrive at that theme eventually? What was it that really got you going with it?
I think for me, it's family and the stories that I write. It's always something that is one of the central themes, or it's always there as a drive in the stories and something that I'm exploring in my stories. And when I'm reading other books, it's something that I'm always fascinated by. So it seemed like a good topic to sort of discuss and chew over, that the idea of what makes family, and you know, nature, nurture, blood. if you know Bright Storm, you kind of know that sort of the you know, blood doesn't necessarily make for a good family all the time. Looking at you, Eudora Vane.
And Haida, when I asked you to come on this and I said the theme is what makes family, what were your thoughts on that initially?
I was really excited by it actually, because the conventional is now the unconventional, and actually family, what we perceive to be that fuzzy feeling of feeling safe and feeling happy around a certain individual, whether that's blood, like you mentioned, Vashti, or not, or the person that's left out of a narrative is done so for a reason, and it's not necessarily the 2.4 nuclear family that's the central theme of our books anymore, which is really crucial to like reflect the realities of the children in our rooms and the children who are reading these books. So I was really excited actually by this theme.
And what about you, Simon? When I said the theme is what is family, what were your initial thoughts?
It's just that weird thing, isn't it? Because I think there's that thing in books generally where there are always missing parents. I think that's, it's, you know, parents are an inconvenience in a lot of children's books, I think. And you know, one of the things I kind of thought about is actually, have I got any books where I've got just a normal family, or where the family is quite normal? And there weren't many, to be honest. And particularly in picture books, I've got lots of picture books with dads and daughters, or dads and sons, and actually mainly dads, and it's about dads' relationships. But I haven't got many that are just about a family, and none of them are happy, apart from one. I managed to find one picture book which is a whole family that is really happy. But so I think as Haida says, it's that, you know, I think books very much reflect, I think, a lot of the things our children go through. But I also think, you know, I think it also made me question the notion of family and that wider idea of family, which I think Vashti touched on, and that idea of how community works in that as well, because I think, you know, a family is now more, I think, for a lot of our children.
I completely agree. James, what did you think? As an author, you must be considering and dealing with families all the time. So what did you think about this theme?
Well, I guess similarly to Vashti, a lot of the stories I tend to write are focused around family and what that means in different ways and different guises. So it was certainly a subject that appealed to me, and I think, you know, like Haida and Simon, you then start to think of all those other books that you've enjoyed, and you then think, well, what is the family setup in that story? You know, I was trying to think of books that I'd want to recommend on this evening's talk, and I was thinking, well, what does that family look like in that story? Because I think, you know, children's books always have been quite good at not necessarily presenting the nuclear family, as Haida said. It's often, and that's often because, as Vashti will know, as the author, you have to kind of have stuff happen to your characters, and you have to get the parents out of the way. So you tend to pull families apart quite early on, or mix them up to have that drama there. So I think it's something that we're kind of used to facing, and something that's very common in children's books. And like Simon said, you know, he was struggling to find the kind of nuclear family in a picture book, or a situation where everything was kind of sunny and happy. There are some out there. There are a few, I'm sure. But I think it's such an interesting subject. And also personally, because my family, when I was growing up, my family wasn't like everybody else's family. I had a stepdad and I had a stepsister and a half brother, and it just, none of my friends really had that set up. So it was always a really interesting kind of thought for me when I was seeing that more in books than in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. And Vashti, on the note that Simon mentioned and then James went on to, talking about killing off or getting rid of parents, the fact that, because actually you told us a really interesting story about one of your books that, you know, where actually there were too many parents going on.
Oh yes, yeah. It
was fascinating.
Griffin Gate, actually. Yeah. So obviously this Griffin Gate is written, published by Barrington Stoke, who produce books for children that are maybe reluctant readers, or have dyslexia, or, you know, anyone that just wants a short read. And when I first started writing it and I gave them the outline, they felt like there were too many characters perhaps going on. So they did come back to me and say, do we really need the dad in this story? We don't feel like he's really adding sorry, Dad, it wasn't really adding anything in this particular situation. So I thought, and actually it made for, you know, and has made with the series for quite an interesting dynamic, having this, you know, a single working mum and two teens, and it's kind of developed really well and become part of what it is. But yeah, I tried to keep the family together.
Editors never say kill them, but that's what they mean, isn't it, Vashti? That's what they're not saying. It's not like get rid of them, but it's like get rid of them.
Yeah, get rid of it. But, you know, it is just one of those things that does, you know, it does add to the stakes and the drama, and it can be helpful. And, you know, not always, but there's often some family situation that has been upturned or upended and things. Actually, I remember Neil Gaiman, when he wrote Fortunately the Milk. Have you read that, saying about it was quite hard to find just those kind of father-child positive relationships sometimes in books. That, you know, that kind of cozy Danny Champion of the World type of relationship that you get sometimes. And I think that's I read that's why he kind of wrote Fortunately the Milk, was to kind of give a really positive representation of a, you know, a dad and a child relationship. So I think there are all sorts out there, but we do tend to kill them off a lot.
Because they get in the way. That's the main thing, isn't it, Vashti? They clutter the place up, and they stop the kids from having an adventure. So it's like, you're either going to have to go somewhere on holiday for a while and get stranded there, or, you know, you're going to meet a sticky end.
And I suppose that's true. You know, if you've got mum and dad around, you're not exactly going to do too many adventurous things at that point. You do need mum and dad to disappear off. So James and Vashti, both of you have have actually touched upon representation in books and actually feeling represented in a family dynamic in books, whatever that is. Haida, do you think we're doing that better now? Do you think educators are more aware of the books to choose for their classrooms? I mean, the books seem to be written. Are we getting better at choosing them?
I think that the more that teachers see themselves as readers, and so we're teachers who read and readers who teach, I think that's becoming more and more nuanced in the literature we choose for the children that we serve and the communities that we serve. And I think that the choice out there is so much more evident. So the publishers like Tiny Owl and Night Salve make it really blaringly obvious which books are allowing to reflect realities. And there's that my head teacher, Sonia Thompson, who I'll probably name drop a lot.
We love Sonia.
Yeah, she taught us about it was from Rudine Sims Bishop, and it was this graphic of how books are like mirrors, they're sliding doors, they're windows, and I just think that the more teachers are aware of that means that our children will have more of a choice in their reading corner, and then it kind of idea of reflecting the reality is like Rudine Sims Bishop talks about. She said it's not just about one group of people seeing themselves represented. It's not just the minorities seeing themselves represented, but it's also the majority seeing themselves and their self-worth perhaps a little exaggerated, and that's not what society is, and that's not what reflects a real society. So I think there's a lot more out there for teachers to kind of get their teeth into regarding a diverse corner and reading pedagogy at school.
Yeah, I completely agree. Simon, coming to you on that note then, as a head, how do you get staff to actually make sure that they are reading books that are really unpicking themes like family with the children?
I think one of the things we've worked really hard on as a school is about staff being readers, and Heide touched on that. But I think if staff aren't readers, then it becomes very, very difficult. So in school, we put time aside for reading. We make sure the books are there. We make sure there's that range of books. But actually, it stems from staff being really knowledgeable. And whilst, you know, I think there's a little bit around Twitter which gives us a false sense of positivity, I think, because I think on Twitter we see lots of people talking about a wide range of books, but actually I don't think that's the case necessarily in most of our schools, and I think it gives us a false sense of positive. But I think it is about teacher knowledge, and it is about sharing and making time to talk about books, and having that and creating a culture in your classroom where children talk about books as well, because actually the real driver of books and the real driver of a reading culture starts with the teacher, but actually it's the children that drive it. And once you've got the children who are talking about books and sharing books and excited about books, that's when the community, that's when that reading community really develops. And actually it's about finding those books. So we've got a group of children who were quite reluctant, really, and we kind of explored graphic novels by things like Class Act and things like that, and actually that really kind of fired them up, and then took them into books by Knights of and things like that. But it's having that range of books, but then giving the children time to talk about it. And I think if we don't allow children time to talk, then they don't genuinely become readers. You know, reading is more than just sitting with a book on your own. Reading is about, you know, there's nothing like a conversation that you have with anybody about a book when you've read it and you're really excited about it, and finding those books and making those choices and thinking about your classes and thinking and knowing what those books contain and what you're putting in front of them, I think is really important. So I think teacher knowledge is key in all of this.
I completely agree. I really do. And on that note, we are going to go to our first Rich Simpson review. So I've shown you lot how good I've got at doing this bit. Let's see if it works. Are we ready? It did.
Good evening. It's me, Rich Simpson at Rich Read a Lot, recommending some books on the theme of family for tonight's Tiny Boys Talks book salon. Tried to think a bit outside the box and go for books with the theme of family, but not regular themes that are seen in lots of books of split families and that sort of dynamic, because there's an awful lot of those around. These books are more about the idea of family and finding yourself and what is a family and where people fit into a family. So a few different suggestions today, but that's not a bad thing. So the first one of these is a book that I read last year, having heard it talked about by Pi Corbett, and hearing the author herself on one of his radio shows he did during lockdown. It's called The Middler, and it's by Kirsty Applebaum, and it comes from Nosy Crow Publishing. And it's about a girl called Maggie, whose part in the family is the middle child. And in the society that she's living in, the middle child is sort of taken for granted. They're never going to do anything special. The eldest are the ones that are the special children. They get sent off to something called the Quiet War. Nobody really talks about it, and it's a great honour for these children to be sent away. But Maggie doesn't seem to accept that. She's not quite sure what's going on, but she doesn't believe everything she's told. I'm trying very hard not to give spoilers away in this, because there's lots of real plot twists. It's a brilliant book. So this book is just about Maggie finding herself and not accepting the fact that middlers don't do anything special and only the eldest children can do special, and she really rails against that. The blurb on the back says, "What if everything she's ever been told is wrong?" And Maggie's a great character because she challenges those things she's told just to believe, because she has to. And so I really, really like this book. It's all about Maggie finding her place for herself, for her family, and for her community as a whole, actually. So a really, really good book. Recommending that one. The next one I think I've mentioned in passing, but October by Catchy. Look at that cover. Isn't that just beautiful, with the foil and the oil? It's beautifully illustrated book, but beautiful writing inside this book as well. Descriptions of the woods and the descriptions of wildlife and the description of how the characters feel, October feels about those things, and the relationships she has are what make this book really, really special. So this is a book about a girl called October who lives with her dad in the woods, and they sleep in the house he's built for them, and they're wild. They really are sort of off the grid. But things go wrong. Again, no spoilers. Things go wrong, and she's forced to change that way of life for a while. And she has to go and live with her mum, who couldn't put up with that way of life and had left her with her dad. And so this is about October coming to grips with having to be part of a family that she didn't want to be part of, having to get to grips with accepting and relationships and rebuilding relationships that she thought were lost. One of the things I really liked in this book, actually, is that when she goes to live with her mum, the way she speaks about her mum and the way she talks are actually quite funny. So she refuses to acknowledge it's your mum. She says, "The lady who tells me she's my mum," and things like that, which are... So there's a bit of dark humour in there, isn't there? But she takes up mudlarking in the river, and I really like the sort of analogy of the... When she's looking for these items that are lost in the river and finding them and bringing them back for people to look at again, it's almost like the relationship. She's had to go and find that relationship and had to get that old thing that she thought was maybe lost and bring that back in again. That's my reading of it anyway. So another really, really powerful book, beautifully written book, October. Again, about someone finding their place in those relationships. The next book I'm going to recommend just quickly, because I can see my timer, my 5 minutes are nearly up for this section, is a book called The Sky Larks War. And this is a brilliant book by Hilary Mackay. And it's about a family and the different characters in that family and the impact of the First World War and how that changes everything. This is a family where the children are used to spending summers together, and the fact that some of them have to go and fight in the war, and the fact that they're growing up, and feelings and relationships and all that type of stuff is coming out. This is just absolutely brilliant. This would be a fantastic BBC drama on a Sunday evening. Absolutely brilliant book. Lots of drama, lots of relationships, lots of action, but also lots of real feeling, empathy, and character-driven plot in it. Lovely book, fantastic book as well. Okay, those are my first recommendations. I'll be back in a bit with some more.
He was given strict timing. He was told 5 minutes and you stick to it. Although he's gone over slightly in the second video, it's got to be said. And I'm not sure where Simon's popped off to. So Simon has disappeared, but I'm sure he'll be back with us. Have any of you read any of those books that were recommended by Rich?
No.
Aha. So good ones to read then.
October sounds amazing.
My internet cut out on me. So, I didn't actually see what.
Yeah, I saw you disappeared in the midst of it.
Sorry, but I know his recommendations are always top notch. So I shall watch back and get them.
Let's move on. I want to talk about the language of family in books. So, James, I'm going to come to you. Are you very considered when you're writing about family and the language you use around family? Is that something you're very considered about?
I should probably say yes, shouldn't I?
You probably should, James, I'll be honest.
I suppose so. I think, as an author, everything you write is considered, hopefully. I mean, if not, you're really doomed, aren't you? So I think it very much depends on what you're trying to tell, doesn't it? Whether the experience of family is a positive one, then your language is going to be different to if it was a negative experience. So that's obviously the main choice. But then I think it's about how the expressions of the family, how the family express themselves to each other as well. So kind of like, who has pet names, how they refer to each other if they're talking to other people, all of that sort of thing. And that's the kind of experience that we have, isn't it? If you hear a member of your family who obviously loves you talking about you to somebody else, and it's really, really lovely, then that makes you feel good. The flip side is hearing somebody that's not so keen, not saying nice things about you at all, and that might be something that people experience, and if you read that in a book, you would think, oh well, it's not just me, it's not something that there's something wrong with me, that person said that about me once. This has happened to this character in a book. So I think you are very conscious of the language you're using, but also in terms of feeling and how that extends out beyond the core of the physical family to the other family that you make, which I know is something we're going to come on to talk to hopefully later on, so I won't go into that too much. But yeah, I think initially probably you write you write the story you want to tell, and then it's about going back, isn't it, Vashti, and sort of pulling the threads out of the story that you want to enhance, and thinking how you do that. And obviously in writing, that's through language.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of I think James is so right. We make so many decisions on writing a book at a word level, sentence, paragraph, the whole chapter, whole story. There's a lot of things, going through our heads when we write, and a lot of decisions. And, from a word level, when you're talking about family, and I mentioned this to you before, like in Wildstock, when I was writing Mum and Dad for Prue's pen.
Oh no, she's frozen.
So sorry if I disappeared then.
You did.
I'll keep talking just in case.
You went, when I wrote Mum and Dad,
we always say in that order, don't we? We tend to, and we. Hopefully, I don't think you missed anything.
No, start again with that, because it was really interesting, because it was about the order of language, which I think is really important. Oh, she's gone again. Haida, whilst we wait for Vashti to reappear, which I hope she will, there seems to be a technological thing. Oh, no, she's back. Are you there?
Yeah, Tuesday night internet. What is my whole street is playing Mario Karts or something.
Right. Well, whilst I've still got you there, talk to us about the order of language, because I think that's really pertinent.
Yeah, because I think it's the things that that we don't necessarily pick up on in our everyday language when we speak about family. So we tend to say mum and dad in that order, don't we? Usually. And we tend to say Mr. and Mrs. in that order. So, you know, in that what's embedded in that language, is it that in the home unit that mum is, you know, the primary sort of caregiver over the dad? Maybe not, just something for you to think about. So when I was writing in Wildspark, I would reverse it. I'd always put dad and mum, and then the same Mr. and Mrs. Are we saying in a relationship, that, you know, the man and then the woman? So I would put Mrs. and Mr. Hayward when I wrote that, just to, you know, not just to put it out there as an exploration, as a kind of, I think we've got to push against these things that are embedded and question them, and also make sure in the fabric, or I liked in the fabric of the worlds that we build, whether that's a fantasy world or a real world, question those choices that we make about not just the main characters but the secondary characters that appear in the stories, and are we being representative of real life in our choices that we make. Yay, I didn't cut out.
No, you didn't, and you made some amazing points there, really fantastic. Haida, when you're teaching, do you consider that? I found that really interesting about the language and swapping the language round. Do you consider that when you're teaching writing, or when you're looking at the books with children?
Yeah, so well, the collocations of like Mr. and Mrs. Bread and butter, we teach them to do when we look at spelling, for example, because you often see those words together. But it's not, I suppose, the relationship between the characters in the book or in the narrative is something that comes into question maybe before we've even touched upon the story. We like to give our children some kind of idea of the kind of relationships that older characters have, so they come to the book ready with that understanding of who they're going to read about, and it helps for lots of reasons, lots of to do with their working memory and making sure that they've got that kind of structure embedded in their long-term memory before we come to read. So we do touch upon it. Yeah, we definitely, it's a point of discussion. And like what James and Vashti were both saying about like the pet names that you give, that's really stark in a book called it's in Mic Drop by Shana Jackson. The way that the characters talk to one another just displays their relationship without having to explicitly say it. So and again, there's the like ambiguous missing mom. We don't know anything about her, but dad is there, pop, and the characters, the way they interact tells us more than we need to know, really. So yeah.
Yeah. Simon, do you think it's important for us to challenge convention in stories? Because convention, you know, if we look at fairy tales, the stepmother was always the nasty one, and the father was always a saviour, and that you did have quite sort of typecast figures within families. Do you think it's important to smash those conventions?
I think it's really important for children to see that actually stories can shock us, I think, sometimes, and sometimes take us out of our comfort zone of what we expect. I think someone like Beth and Wolven does some fantastic retellings of fairy tales, but actually switches the convention around and switches the roles and the characterization of that, and brings different characters to the fore. And I think children need to know the tropes, really, and then we can play with them. So I think there's a need to know why those things are there. So why the stepmothers are evil and why it's the father figure, and it's those kind of things that we need to know from fairy tales. But actually, then we can play with them. And actually, what I really enjoy about a lot of children, so someone like Garth Nix's Frog Kisser completely plays with the conventions of fairy tales and switches the roles and switches the characters and switches the idea of family, and that's really exciting. But he couldn't do that without children understanding what those conventions in the first place. So there's a balance there for us to strike in schools of how do we teach the conventions, so then we can challenge the conventions. And I do think challenging them is important. But if we just go straight to the challenge, then there's no understanding of why. So I do think it's really important. But there are an increasing range of books that challenge conventions brilliantly. But we've got to let the conventions be there first. So then we can push against them, and then we can think about them and have those really brilliant conversations with children.
That makes complete and utter sense. It really does. That actually we need to push against convention, but actually the children need to understand the constructs of the convention initially. We've talked about representation. We've talked about the fact that not many people live in, the sort of the what was so-called family. Let's talk heritage and how books actually help us to really unpick heritage and family. Haida, I'll come to you. Grandparents and books, does it help with heritage?
Yes. So
well done.
And I'm going to mute myself now. Grandparents are hugely important. I think with grandparents come and a tale that we might not pick up otherwise. And this is, for example, there's a book that has been published by Tiny Owl. And my heritage, I'm half Iranian. And this book, The Little Black Fish, it's won the Hans Christian Andersen Award. It's a tale of a grandma fish who's basically challenging that convention that we're to stay in a pond. And there's one tiny fish who wants to escape and go out to sea. And everyone's told him there's a seagull that's going to eat you. And the grandma is there kind of egging him on to go. Don't stay in this pond with the 30 other thousand fish. Leave. And I think that echoes the relationship of grandparents sometimes in real life too. They don't have that full responsibility most of the time of that child, so they're trying to push them and do. So yeah, I think it's great to look at that relationship with grandparents, because there's a backstory and heritage again that if there is an absent parent, you can only get from the grandparent.
Yeah. James, when you're writing, do you consider, is it like a family tree? Do you consider the whole heritage of the main character, or how does it occur?
I think you do think about their immediate family, and certainly when I was working on The Apprentice Witch, I went through different versions of what her family were. So to start with, she had both her parents with her, again, you then run into that problem like, hang on, why is she leaving her family? How does that work? So trying to work around those sorts of problems, that's when you start to kind of, send people off to fight in mysterious wars, or have somebody fall under a bus, or, unfortunately die from a horrible illness. And you feel bad briefly and you move on. But it is, you try different things. And I think through the trying, that's when you then shape that family. So it's kind of an organic process, a bit like our own families. Our own families don't just suddenly, they're not just suddenly there. They change and they shift, and people come and people go, and your family today will be different from family that you have in 10 years time, or going back in time. So it is quite nice to see that evolution of how people kind of come in and go out, and who you add in and who you take away. I think part of the thing around challenging conventions as well, and grandparents, again, I think there is that whole thing about the grandparents being the kind of old wise person, and it's always nice to have the wise person in your story, but it's also nice, I think, I didn't want my Ariane Win's grandma, I didn't want her to be kind of like this old lady knitting in the corner. She's like, you know, she's a bit kick-ass really, and that, you know, that was really a nod to my grandmothers, because they weren't little old ladies that sat knitting in the corner. One of them did, but you know, she was still kind of feisty. And again, I think, you know, that's that reflection. So many of the children today spend so much time with grandparents that they have to see that in their stories. You know, whether that's just that they spend time being cared by them, or they're cared by them full time. So the evolution of creating that family. The new story I'm writing at the moment actually is kind of, I suppose, a little bit more traditional. But again, I ran into that problem where in the early versions, the main character's mother was there, and then I decided to kill her off. And then I brought her back to life again, and then I sent both the parents off to do something else. So they're not absent for any horrible reason. They're just not there when the story's taking place. And I did actually make a family tree, and because it's kind of a story that goes back in time as well, I did have to think about those family threads going all the way back through, not all the way back through time. I didn't get quite that carried away, but I was trying to think loosely about how this person's connected to that person, and where these bits of family merge together. It's quite fun, but it can also be a pain in the bum, can't it, Vashti?
Oh, Jay, honestly, with Dark Whispers, because you go into Harriet's heritage and her family, and you meet her great aunt, and the family trees I had to draw to get it all right, and work out who knew who when, who was the right age to know so and so at university, so that they could have been plotting something. And it was complicated but really fun as well. And I love all those all the extended family characters are really crucial, important characters when you're writing to consider, because they bring something different and a slightly different outlook. Like in real life, you know, our own grandparents, you will get maybe the cheeky one that's sneaking you a biscuit, or kind of, you know, being the fun role model and things. And you know, that's one of the things that I've always loved about James's writing. That sense of family, and in all sorts of places. So in The Apprentice Witch, you've got Ariane Win's relationship with the grandmother, and then Ariane Win goes to become, you know, the witch of this small town Lull, and it almost like this place becomes a new family for her, and the characters that she meets there. And it's you know, obviously there's action and suspense, but there's this coziness that wraps around it as well. So even though her family isn't, you know, a typical family in the sense of the word, there's so much love and family in that story, which is really nice and important for children to see, that you can find family in unexpected places, especially for us at the moment with the times that we're living in, isn't it? It's hard, and you know, some parents, if they're, you know, teachers must be feeling this, if you're having to sort of go in and your own children are going off to other schools, and you've got key worker children coming in. Families is being found in all sorts of new and unexpected ways, isn't it?
It really is. And Simon, I'm going to come to you on that note, actually. The fact that family now seems to be so much more extended and more sort of community. Would you agree with regards to school?
I think it's been one of those, it's been a really weird year with regards to that. I think what we've all found is how important our schools are to our local communities, and I think sometimes we've kind of lost that. But actually, I think this past year has brought that back, and it's been an immense source of comfort, actually, as a head teacher, to see that community pulled together, and that community to support both my staff and the children, but also the school support that community. And I think it's kind of gone both ways, and it kind of feels a little bit old-fashioned. I think it feels a little bit that this isn't, it's something that we've potentially lost in this country a little bit, and actually it's pulled a lot of that community spirit back together. I hate to say the wartime spirit, but it is that kind of caring for each other and caring. You know, I know families who've helped provide food for other families and done all those kind of things, and it, you know, having visited other countries, you kind of often see that kind of more community family kind of approach to childhood. I've got some books which kind of really interest me about family, but it's about community as well. And they're books people probably haven't heard of, but it's called The Most Beautiful Village in the World, which is about a village in Afghanistan. And it kind of is before, and then the village gets broken apart by war, and it's about family and all those things. But they are, you know, it's a stunning trilogy of books. But they're all about that community and how that community can get ripped apart, but actually how ultimately that community comes back together and rebuilds. And I think this year in schools, I felt that community really pulled together and support each other when it's been really hard, you know, and that's been, you know, it's been quite joyous, really. I mean, that's a hard thing to say on what's been a really hard year. But actually, that community has been the real high point, and how that community's been the family for all of us, really, and how we pulled together. So, yeah, I do think that wider sense of family, I think, is really important, and I do think there are children's books that share that really well.
Absolutely, and I think you're spot on in that our understanding of family, in a sense, has been very developed, brought on by everything that we're going through, and we are now pulling on sources that maybe we didn't pull on before, community and so on. And I know that, you know, I think the constructs of family aren't necessarily what we assume. Well, initially when I thought about what is family, I had this little sort of picture in my head, and then actually it's sort of been blown apart by all of you. It really has. So I'm going to go on to Rich Simpson for his last review, then come back to all of you for final thoughts about family, communities, and anything else you want to say. So let's see if this works. So I don't know if it will. Oh, it will. Here we go.
Recommending some more books on the Tiny Voice Talks book salon on the theme of family. Again, I've tried to think slightly outside the box with some of these ones, so excuse if they're not quite what you were expecting, but I think it's quite nice to recommend some things that maybe people wouldn't have thought of before and look at the messages in those. So following on from the last set of books, this garnered a lot of attention last year when it came out. It's called The Midnight Guardians, and again, it's one of those books that I would just absolutely love to see being made into one of those great sort of Sunday evening, Saturday evening BBC dramas to watch. Set in the war. It's called The Midnight Guardians. It's about a boy called Cole who's been evacuated from London to live with his aunt. And he senses that his sister is in danger. Now, he's lost the rest of his family in the war from an incident bomb. So he's out in the countryside, but he gets this sense that something's wrong. His sister was supposed to come to visit him for Christmas. She doesn't turn up. He's absolutely distraught about that. He senses that he needs to get back to save her. However, it's not a real war adventure journey. It's more of a fantasy. There's a little bit of the Narnia about this. He's accompanied on his quest to get back to London by, I'm going to read these out so I get it right, a 6-foot tiger, a badger in a waistcoat, and a miniature knight. And he needs to race back to London to try and get her, but he's been pursued and tried to be stopped by someone called the Midwinter King. Now, the Midwinter King is a bit like it's a bit Game of Thrones. Actually, it's a bit like the winter is coming, the sort of the Ice King that was coming in that one as well. So it's quite a spooky, quite dark in places. These two worlds colliding, the fantasy of Cole trying to escape and rescue sister. A really, really good book about family looking after each other, guardians looking after each other, and Cole's sort of family are these fantasy creatures, and it's explained why and where that comes from in there as well. So I'm being a bit mysterious because, again, I don't want to give it away, but a great book, great adventure story with lots of family values and love between characters displayed in there. Next one, Tamarind and the Star of Ishtar. Again, really beautiful cover, beautifully decorated. This by Jasbinder Bilan, who won the Costa Children's Book Award for the book before this, Asha and the Spirit Bird. This is about a girl called Tamarind, who never knew her Indian mum, who died when she was really young, and who goes to spend summer with her family in the Himalayas. And when she's there, she tries to find out more about her mum because it's her mum's family that she's staying with. And you get the feeling that there's some sort of hidden secret that she's desperate to try and find out. There's all sorts of family dynamics in here, sort of not wanting to talk about a relative who's gone, and Tamarind desperate to find out the truth, and people not wanting to tell her about it. Beautiful descriptions in here of the Himalayas and the countryside. Beautiful descriptions of food in here as well. Food's a big deal in this one. It's really, really nice. And there's a sort of mystery, very mystical fantasy sort of element in this, in what Tamarind finds and how she discovers the truth and the story behind her ancestors, and comes to find herself really in her place in the family, and accepts how things are and her dad's new relationship with her new stepmom and things like that as well. So lots of family issues in here, but couched in a really, really nice story set in the Himalayas as well. So nice to be a different setting in that one as well. The last one I'm going to go for is a real curveball. It's called The Monsters of Rookhaven. Oh, apologies for the shine on that one. And this is by Patrick Kenny. And the first line in this is just brilliant. Just first line in this is, I need to find it. Mirabelle was in the garden feeding bones to the flowers when Uncle Enoch came for her. And this is about a pair of orphan brother and sister who stumble across a portal to another world, and they stumble into the house of the Monsters of Rookhaven, which is a sort of cross between the Addams family and some sort of dark horror house with these witches and monsters. And it's about a battle between the two worlds, trying to stay apart from each other and not cross over and not hurt each other. There's a horrible villain in here called Mr. Thieves, and he's trying to catch up with them and find his way through the portal. And this is just a brilliant book about a really, really strange family, about finding your place in a family or in a group of people, no matter who you are, whether you're the monster or not. And sometimes monsters aren't the ones that we'd expect them to be. So I think I've gone 15 seconds over my time there, but some more really, really good books. And I hope Toria lets me away with being 30 seconds over. I hope you enjoy the recommendations. Thanks for listening.
See, he always pushes his luck, doesn't he? Always pushes his luck. He was given a 5-minute, 2 5-minute windows, and he still has to go over. Yeah, those books there were great recommendations. So I want final thoughts from all of you, because I always find it surprising that we have an hour, and yet it just seems to fly away so quickly. And I just feel that we're unpicking, just starting to unpick. So final thoughts, final recommendations, final whatever you want to say about families. James, coming to you first.
I would say that I think in most children's books there is some family connection. It might not be necessarily the traditional concept of family, but I think there's always a family, a community, relationships being formed around the main characters, whether that's friends or school communities, or the community they live in, or the community they find themselves in. The characters always forming a family of some sort. They could be animal characters that the main character forms their family with, but there's always that element to a story. And I didn't do any of my recommendations. I've got a pile of books here beside me. I think in terms of so this is a slightly odd one. The Menims by Sylvia Waugh is one of my absolute favourite books. It's a very traditional family setup, mum, dad, loads of kids. But their next door neighbour lives in the cupboard under the stairs. And their whole world is based around pretending, because they're actually a family of life-sized rag dolls. So they kind of live this crazy life, pretending to do things like pretending to have tea, pretending the next door neighbour's coming round, when actually they've all averted their eyes as she lets herself out of the cupboard under the stairs, goes out the back door, comes round to the front door, knocks, and pretends she's just come round from next door. It's fantastic, and it is there's a threat to them in that they may lose their home, but you just see these wonderful interactions between this family of rag dolls.
I love that. And what we will do, James, is we'll put all of your recommendations onto the Padlet with everyone else's, so that we've captured those. Simon, last thoughts about family and recommendations?
I think it's been a fascinating conversation. I think one of the things that kind of really struck me, and coming from James, that idea of grandparents, I think really kind of struck me. And so I stepped back and thought about books about grandparents, and I kind of came up with two, really, both by Ulf Stark and from Gecko Press. And The Runaways is about a granddad who knows he's nearing the end of his life, so he runs away with his grandson. So runs away from their home, and it's stunning and funny and emotional and beautiful. And then there's Can You Whistle, Joanna, which is about a child who doesn't have a grandparent, so he steals one, and it's made me really think about the importance of grandparent relationships. I then kind of got a couple of others. A Different Pond by Bao Phi and Tai Bu, which is about a Vietnamese family and about heritage and about the wider family, and it's just a fantastic father-son story. But what it highlights is that importance of wider family and the heritage of family, and it's a refugee family who came to America after the Vietnamese War. So it's just a brilliantly beautiful book. And then finally, I think it's that idea of family, for me, of the family that you have and then the family that you choose. And so my last recommendation is Evelyn Dalray is moving away friendships, really, rather than families, but actually how important friendships are. And it's just a fantastic book about two children who are closer than they are to their families, I think, in some ways, and then moves away. And I would recommend all four of those. But just, I think as James said, that wider conversation that's there, and it's complex, and actually it should be complex, and we need to show that to our children, that complexity of what family is and what it means.
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon. And Vashti, Simon has beautifully sort of linked to you, because your concept of family very much, from Brightstorm, etc., is that concept of actually family is what you make it. So what are your final thoughts about family?
Yeah, I would say that, for me as an author, I certainly feel that that responsibility to make sure that you know, there is no normal with family. Everyone, your normal is your normal, and that's, you know, what you know, none of us can help what we're born into, can we, family wise? But you know, there's, whether that's a great situation or not so great, there is family to be found in a variety of ways and in all sorts of makeups and things. So, you know, it's certainly something I'll keep exploring, especially in the world of Brightstorm. And I'm gonna recommend a couple of things. So firstly, there's this lovely author called James Nichol. I don't know, but
I'll send you a check, Vashti, I promise.
It's a beautiful series, and I think if you haven't discovered it, go and you know, it's like a big wonderful hug of a series that yeah, with some beautiful relationships, some great creatures in peril, and it's sort of yeah, you can feel the warmth in the grandparent relationship with Ariane Wynne. You can see that where that's come from with James and his relationship with his grandmothers. And it comes through beautifully. So that's one. And then also the wonderful Sinead O'Hart with the Star Spun Web. Oh, there we are. There. So I love Sinead's writing and books. And in the Star Spun Web, there are, you know, parallel universes and things like that. But Tess, the main character, she's got a pet tarantula, Violet, who's, you know, get rid of those stereotypes that tarantulas and spiders are scary. It's a good sort of sidekick. But Tess lives in an orphanage at the start, and you know, we're so used to orphanages very often in stories as being these dank, awful places of horror, and it's a wonderful home, and the people that run it are gorgeous, and the friendships that she finds there, and it is a real tight family unit. So it's a good one to kind of bust the orphanage stereotype. I'm sure there's awful orphanages out there as well, but you know, it's nice to see a positive representation too.
Yeah, love that. And Haida, I'm going to finish with you and your thoughts, and I believe there's a poem as well.
So I'll just recommend Where the World Turns Wild, which actually is about two children who live with their grandma, and they escape with her blessing, with grandma's blessing, to rediscover the wild, and their wild actually becomes their family, the Lynx cat. So it's a brilliant book. Mic drop, I've already recommended. The Year 5 children are loving it. And I think leading on from that unconventional, Phil Soup by Alan Duran, another Tiny Owls publication. There's a manipulative porcupine in there that messes up the idea of family, so that's a great one to have a look at. And the poem I was hoping to read, sorry, it won't take too long. It was just by Valerie Bloom, and in Stars with Flaming Tales, she has a collection of poetry about family and the different types. So this one just really echoed with me about the feeling you get when you're near somebody that's your family, whether that's your blood family or the one that, like Simon said, you've chosen. So it's called You Are. You are the silver in the moonlight, the waves kissing the beach, the nectar in the mango, the sweetness in the peach. You are the perfume of the jasmine, winter's virgin snow, the softness of a velvet cushion, a sunset's golden glow. You're the contented purr of the kitten, the orange groves of Spain, the silence of soft midnight, and a favourite tune's refrain. Flowers bloom in winter, warm sunlight bathes the ground, and bird song fills the neighbourhood whenever you're around. So that's by Valerie Bloom, and that summed up what family is to me, the feeling that you have.
And I think that's a wonderful way to conclude our show tonight. It truly is, because I think, you know, those words are so incredibly powerful. For everyone out there, the next Tiny Voice Tiny Voice Talks Book Salon, I have to get the 5 words in the right order, is next. It's always the second Tuesday of every month. So it's Tuesday the 9th of March, and we are talking about books in school settings, actually. So yep, join us for that. We will share the Padlet with all of these recommendations on. Thank you if you've stayed with us for the whole hour for watching, but it will also be on YouTube, so it can be shared out. Finally, thank you so much, Haida, James, Vashti, who's disappeared yet again, and so Simon, Haida, James. Oh, is she back? She comes and she goes, oh, yes, I was just thanking you and you went. So I'll go again. Thank you very much, Haida, James, Vashti and Simon, for being fantastic guests and just making me think outside the box with regards to family. So thank you so much.